Welcome to the second episode in a two-part Legendarium series about the life of King Henry IV of England. In the comments section, please tell me whether or not you think Henry IV deserves to be remembered as a good king. Whether or not one thinks Henry IV was justified in removing Richard II, he created a terrible problem by usurping the throne. As a descendant of kings stretching back 250 years, no one questioned the right of Richard II to rule, whereas the people of England would never see a usurper like Henry IV as the rightful king, so anyone who could raise an army could claim the throne just as Henry IV had. Unsurprisingly, Henry faced an immediate crisis during September 1400 in Wales, where Owen Glendower declared himself the Prince of Wales. Even worse, the Welsh rebel had the support of the Earl of March, whose son Edmund Mortimer, the great-grandson of Edward III, could claim Henry's throne. As usual, the French used any opportunity to batter England. English barons, meanwhile, plotted a rebellion of their own, as if the king didn't have enough trouble. The discontents included great nobles like the Earl of Worcester, the Earl of Northumberland, and the celebrated medieval knight Sir Henry Hotspur Percy. Henry IV first turned to the English rebels and met the troublesome turncoats in battle on July 21st, 1403 at the Battle of Shrewsbury. The king led his army personally, and the royalists killed Sir Percy while Worcester became a prisoner and then went on the executioner's diet, losing 8 pounds from the neck up in the time it took to swing an axe. The Earl of Northumberland, the Earl of March, and other rebel barons would not give up so easily, and they changed strategy. They began to conspire with Archbishop Scrope of York and Owen Glendower to divide England between themselves. Henry IV discovered this plot, and the Earl of Northumberland fled to Scotland. From March to December 1406, the Long Parliament met and debated Henry IV over the ever-troublesome issue of the royal treasury. To pay for the wars against imposed high taxes upon England. Despite his victories over English rebels, Henry IV failed to wipe out the Welsh rebellion, and now French troops fought alongside Owen Glendower. Still aware that he had no real right to the crown, Henry IV proved reasonable. He agreed that going forward he would always listen to Parliament's grievances before imposing new taxes. This marked a small step on the long road to constitutional monarchy. Things improved for Henry IV as the decade wore on. In March 1406, the young Prince James, the future James I of Scotland, became shipwrecked off the east coast of England. Invited Prince James to the Tower of London and demanded a hefty ransom for his release. Unfortunately for James, his father died soon after, and although technically the King of Scotland, nobody came forward with the ransom. James remained in comfortable confinement for 18 years. Just as Henry IV appeared to be drinking from the golden cup of good fortune, at age 40, the stocky and heavy-jowled monarch suffered a mysterious illness. Most likely he endured a series of mini-strokes that made it hard for him to travel or speak. He also suffered from another strange illness that disfigured his skin and supposedly made him rather terrifying to look at. The king went to great efforts to hide his illness, sending letters to local sheriffs, ordering them to arrest anyone who spread rumors of Henry's sickness. Meanwhile, his bishops, very curiously, received letters requesting prayers for his recovery. Growing depressed, Henry IV took to describing himself as a sinful wretch and talked of repeating his youthful pilgrimage to Jerusalem, but constant trouble ensured that he would stay in England. In February 1408, Henry IV won the Battle of Bramham Moor against the combined Welsh and English rebels. He then made Edmund Mortimer a prisoner and executed both the Archbishop of York and the Earl of Northumberland. As word stubbornly leaked out about the king's terrifying skin condition, rebels whispered that God struck him with leprosy as punishment for executing the archbishop and deposing the king. In 1409, Henry IV finally stamped out the Welsh rebellion by capturing the last rebels at Harlech Castle, and Owen Glendower disappeared into the mountains and entered the realm of legend. This time, Henry IV could not lead the armies which took Harlech. That honor went to his son Henry of Monmouth, a brave knight who fought alongside his father against the Percy rebellion. Prince Hal could not have been further from the drunken brawler and troublemaker portrayed in Shakespeare's plays. He did, however, openly criticize his father and openly pressed for Henry IV to abdicate so he could take over the throne. For a couple of years, this feud between father and son kept the kingdom in a state of near crisis. Finally, in March 1413, the old king collapsed while at prayer in Westminster Abbey. His knights carried him to the abbot's quarters and placed him in a straw mattress beside the fire, where he fell into a deep sleep. As medieval custom required, he placed his crown on the pillow beside him. Thinking that Henry IV already died, his attendant covered his face with a linen cloth, while Prince Henry picked up the crown and left the room. Suddenly, Henry IV woke up and demanded to know what happened to his crown. When Prince Henry faced his father, he simply said, "Sir, to mine and all men's judgment, you seem dead in this world. So I, as your next heir apparent, took that as mine own." Henry IV knowingly answered, "What right could you have to the crown when I have none?" Indeed, Henry IV never lost his gnawing sense of guilt over deposing and likely murdering his cousin. Yet he also kept his sense of humor. Looking around the room, the king asked where his attendants brought him. They replied that they brought the dying king to the Jerusalem chamber. For his last words, Henry IV said, "Praise be to God, for it was foretold me long ago that I would die in Jerusalem." The king breathed his last on March 20th, 1413, at the age of 46. He died looking at the R in Jerusalem, perhaps thinking of Richard, the man he deposed. For nearly a decade he had been racked by disease, perhaps leprosy or eczema. His 25-year-old son, now King Henry V, buried his father in Canterbury Cathedral before his own coronation on April 9, 1413. He went on to become one of the great soldier kings, defeating the French at the Battle of Agincourt only 2 years later. That wraps things up for this episode of the Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.